This is Raymond Posch with the New Ways of Being podcast. And I'm going to dive right in today. I have a guest that I'm very excited to talk with. Uh, it is Dr. Julie Krull. She is here with me online. And we're going to talk about how we can change the world by raising our consciousness. Now, this is what I know about Julie, and then I'll let her speak up. She is an evolutionary leader, award-winning author, dynamic speaker, and popular talk show host. Dr. Julie has her finger on the pulse of transformative change, conscious evolution, and whole system health in these times of sweeping global challenges. I think that's very important, that whole system health. We can talk about that. She's called a Renaissance woman for the dawning unitive age. She is a respected leader, spiritual guide, and co-creative consultant for high impact individuals and organizations ready for radical transformation. And she is host of her own podcast, The Dr. Julie Show. So, Dr. Julie, I don't know if you normally have the doctor there, but
You can
welcome.
call me Julie,
Yes,
Raymond.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that welcome.
Well, tell us a little bit more about you and your story and what you brought to this point in time, and just keep it a little bit short because we'll then dive into the conversation about changing the world.
Awesome. That's where I'd rather be anyway. Let's talk
Uh,
about changing the world and transformation. Thanks, Raymond. Yeah, I don't know what more to say about myself. I just show up to do the work and hopefully we'll get deeper into that and we'll get to feel the essence of who this person might be. But I've worked for a long time on the planet working with individuals. I was a psychotherapist for several decades and then began doing some more spiritual work and spiritual guidance, which evolved into the planetary healing and working with bigger systems and yeah, so from individual psychotherapist to planetary healer, I there's just a lot of work to do on the planet, and it's
oh,
kind of the shortcut of my professional journey anyway.
well, thank you. I agree totally. There's a lot of work to do, and you know, it is somewhat surprising, I think, to me, but very pleasing that you made that leap to, do so much more, and really, um, you're you're also pioneering some ground, I would say, in that you talk very much about conscious evolution and certainly for me, and I know for a lot of people, that comes from a spiritual perspective, perspective of, uh, I my understanding is that the thing that we would call God is pure consciousness, and everything arises out of pure consciousness. But probably not everyone is open to that full discussion. But evidently, you're hitting a chord with more and more people these days about, the world is changing. Our human consciousness is changing, whether we know it or not. But certainly, it needs to change, I think, in order to create more of a world that we want. So, yeah, speak about that a bit more. Tell us, how you did make that leap.
Thank you, Raymond. Yeah, I agree with you on your perspective of the divine being consciousness and a field of love, like this unified field. I woke to that awareness at a very young age when I had a near death experience at the age of 4.
Wow.
So I had this near death experience and then like saw other realms, experienced, this multidimensional reality. And what I sensed was God from the age of 4, which wasn't a being, a man sitting on a cloud, even though the churches and the upbringing and spiritual teaching were there to guide a different understanding. In my early age, I began a conversation with God from a very young age at 4 and continued to have that dialogue. And my spiritual gifts that I continued to walk in both worlds from a very young age and continue that dialogue. I remember being a very precocious young girl. I thought about humanity at the age of 4 or 5, 6, and had a more prolific experience at the age of 11 that kind of guided my work on the planet. At the age of 11, I woke up saying, I don't get humans. I really don't want to be here. I don't understand this, how they treat one another. I don't understand why they are the way they are. And I was very acutely aware of not just domestic violence in my own home and the dysfunction of early childhood trauma, but I was very aware of pain and suffering on the planet. I would see how we treated one another. I especially had a very vivid experience with starving children in Africa when I was a kid. There was so many advertisements on TV and articles, and I would see starvation and just it just really really got to me. So from more personal to the collective, I could see humanity didn't know how to do the work on the planet. I just didn't understand humans and wanted to go home, wanted to return to where I knew I was safe, I belonged. I felt in the oneness of, it wasn't an individual Julie, it was a merging with the all experience from a very young age. So that kind of guided me, Raymond. Like from age 11, then I was shown the evolution of consciousness on our planet. I was shown the trajectory of what was going to happen in my 50s and what was going to happen on the planet right here, right now. So I was given the visual and Gnostic experience of the guidance of what was going to happen and how consciousness would evolve and my role in it, and kind of a little roadmap of here's how you're going to get there. So from a young age, I always knew that was coming. I knew, oh, I'll be writing books and I'll be speaking and I'll be doing these things. And of course, didn't know what that might look like when it came, but got that nudge back. I was always looking for my team. Raymond, I was on the planet going, there's supposed to be other people here, but I live in a small town in Nebraska and could never find the teammates, who am I going to work with? Where's this? How's this going to happen? And one day that magically, mystically appeared in my life. And from that moment on, a whole new world opened up, and I knew my team, I knew my assignment, and began to transition to do the global work. So
Well, that's incredible, and I'm always impressed by that kind of story when I hear it, and it's surprising, or maybe not so surprising. Um, for this book project, We Can Change the World. Uh, it's it's turned out that a number of the people who are participating are in the Evolutionary Leaders Circle, and are you a part of that, or?
yes, yeah.
Yes, that's what I thought. And some, but not all of the people that I've talked to have a similar kind of story, that it started for them at a very early age. You probably know Jude Curlin, and it started at, she said, 4 years age for her as well. For me, that was not the case. I grew up in a rural, on a farm, rural world, um, and I was very in touch with nature and close to it, and so there may have been some spiritual aspects to that that I maybe didn't realize. But I was more pragmatic, went through the technical, logical process of a degree in technology, et cetera, and a career in technology. And then along the way, I had some events that kind of changed my thinking, and I had degrees of awakening, but nothing exactly like what you're describing, except for me. It happened last year. I was suddenly able to have conversations. I call them telepathic conversations with God and with other spiritual beings. And, you know, everything began to shift. Now, I wasn't totally clear, like you, of what that was going to look like. But when I got to the decision to use my project management skills and what I had learned about consciousness and humanity up to this point, and I've been learning it extensively on my podcasts. Um, then when I finally realized I've got to help produce this book, it might make some difference in the world, you know,
Mhm.
and so I'm hoping that is the case. But um, I'm one thing I'm impressed about is that there are many more people who are actively pursuing uh, helping to change the world exactly like you are, and in different ways. And I find that very reassuring.
Yeah. Yeah. There are networks of networks. There's so many different. It's, Raymond, the consciousness is coming through humanity, whether, like you were saying, we're going to shift the consciousness, whether people are aware of it or not. That impulse of evolution is moving through our species, and more people are awakening to this new level, like the new larger aperture of our consciousness lens is it's expanding, but they're also getting the information that we need, the roadmap, the guidance. Like everyone is a part of this evolution. And so as we begin to awaken to that, what's ours to do is uniquely ours to do. And so I say that because it's fun to watch this like emerging on every continent, in every country around the world. There are those who are waking and finding each other and beginning to do the work of radical transformation. I mean, there's a lot of gentle transformation happening, but we've been speaking about it for decades, and now we're at that turning point where people go, "Oh, I get what you've been talking about now. I see that our systems and structures don't support the true nature of reality, of who we really are, and this evolution." And so it's coming through our awareness. It's landing in the most amazing places, and with
Yeah.
people that you would just be so surprised that you wouldn't imagine.
Yes. Well, and that is interesting because, we see, uh, if we look at the news, and I try not to look at the news very much, we see how pervasive the consciousness of separation and, some degree of victimhood and being somewhat still rigidly based on the old ways that we've lived by for a couple thousand years. And I can see people changing, but it's a pretty small slice of humanity at this point, and I still have to wonder, um, you know, it, is it a given that we will make it, that we will survive through this period of change, or is it not? Do we need to be out hustling and spreading the word? or is it going to happen regardless? What's your answer? What have you been told?
It's already happened. I'll say it this way, and it may not be the most popular answer that you get, because those in fear and separation are still looking at our planet, our systems, our structures, humanity from that place of separation,
Right.
seeing it in that way. And so there's a lot of fear and scarcity and angst and urgency and emergency that arises, a lot of anxiety in the collective system, in the collective nervous system. And yet, like you're saying, our media is showing just a small population
Right.
of 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 humanity, and really we're seeing the breakdown of the most visible systems and structures. We're looking at what's breaking down in media and what's happening with social media and our trust and our communications and truth. We're looking at our governing systems, and we're seeing that the corruption within systems is, the underbellies being shown, and there needs dramatic change, dramatic, radical transformation needs to happen. And, I think there's more awakening than we know. I really do believe that. And I trust the impulse of evolution. I trust the God source that you talked about. And it's here guiding and directing and moving our planet in ways that we don't see and we don't know. But to be honest, Raymond, the the backlash of transformation is causing an alarm. So those in separation consciousness that are invested in that, and I see it as a level developmental stage of our humanity, and we're all in these different developmental stages. And those who are really invested in the good of how it was in separation are really putting up a fight to keep it that way. They don't understand what's happening. They can't relax into the transformation
Right.
and be okay, because it looks apocalyptic, right? It looks like the world is changing. The earth is ending. Our lives are done. We're over. So that fear in the system is endemic. It's a broad-based fear, but it's mostly coming from the dinosaur that we're trying to do CPR on. So it like the dinosaurs like going, hey, help, do the CPR, and those doing the CPR are getting really tired and they're getting worn out, and it's time to stop doing CPR on the dinosaurs. And I say that in a way that, let me just add some comfort in, and let me add a little love into that response, because I think it's essential of that that really, we, all of our systems and structures need to transform to more closely reflect who we are as divine beings, our divine humanity. This is about the embodiment of our divinity. And as we're moving forward, the systems and structures need to reflect that higher awareness, that higher frequency, that higher level of functioning of who we are as a species. And so many are going to break down. Some are going to burn to the ground and be forever gone, but some are going to gently transition. And it feels like to so many that everything is breaking down. Nothing's going to be the same. It's going to be horrible. It's going to be horrible. And, buckle up. And people who are still in separation consciousness kind of, they create a prognostic of where we're going, and it looks really grim. But there are those who are inside the systems and structures, bringing the light, bringing the love, bringing all of the transformative beauty and elegance in to gentle the birth. One of my mentors, Barbara Marx Hubbard, used to always talk about gentling the birth.
Yes.
We can wake up and we can say, yes, we're going to gentle this birth. And birth isn't gentle. we have labor pains, we have contractions, we have pain. It's messy. It's a messy, icky process on so many levels, and yet it's a beautiful process, and it's gorgeous. So there are many on the planet here to gentle the birth and to help with the transformation from the inside out, bringing more love and light into the systems and structures to realign with a higher level of awareness and integrity and really refine where we're at. And then there are those systems that are just broken, corrupt, that need radical change. And that's happening. We're watching it. And some of them just can't survive because they were based in a hierarchy, a dominance, a control, an extraction, anything that's about control over or extracting, it's not going to be around.
Yep.
So we have to reform and refine and keep doing that work.
Thanks for your beautiful explanation there. I think that's so important for people to hear, not just on this podcast, but everywhere. And you said so many things that make me have, kind of smile about, oh, well, I'm aware of that. And of course, everyone's aware of it, what's going on, but they just don't know everything in the story, as
Yeah.
you've said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, when um, when I first began having the conversations with God, uh, one of the things that God kept telling me is, "Let your light shine." God has said that many, many times, and one of my responses was, "I don't know how to let my light shine. That's something new to me. I don't know how to do that." But I kind of stayed into it and began to experience it more and more. But I think lots of people will have to go through some kind of learning process. It may not be like mine at all. But and the other thing that God has told me is, you're a way shower, not a teacher. The time for spiritual teachers has passed. It's time for way showers who are exploring into new ways of being. And thus, that's the name of my podcast. But uh, when I first started my podcast, I had some different ideas of what that podcast would look like. Now I have a totally different view of new ways of being, because beingness and really understanding our own divinity, divinity is, I think, an important step for us
Yeah.
to take, because we are so much more powerful than we know. We are totally connected. We are totally guided. We are totally protected and assured. But we're so conditioned to a way of living and certain beliefs that is a big step to make that shift
Yeah.
and understand, oh, I'm a part of God.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound right.
I'm a co-creator. I'm a co-creator with God. I'm a co-evolutionary partner on this planet. Yeah. A lot of time, our many traditional religious doctrines, teach us different. There are those who do teach our divinity to us, and at the core, a lot of the religion have that beautiful message. It's just got twisted and turned along the way. So yeah, we're waking to that new way of being on the planet, like you're saying, and it's really about embracing our own divinity and understanding what that means for each of us. And you're right. We all have to do the individual work too. We have to do the awakening work. We have to do what it takes to get us there.
Okay, now I have some questions I want to ask about the work that you are doing. But first, I'd like to hear from you a little bit more about your book, Fractured Grace, I think is the name. And uh, it sounds very interesting, very fascinating. Tell me the story of how that book came into being and the overview. message.
Thank you. Fractured Grace. The tagline is how to create beauty, peace, and healing for yourself and the world. And it came through in that I always knew I was going to write books, and I've written a couple more and getting ready to publish again next year. And I've had other chapters in different books along the way. But this book came in when I had a freak accident in 2014. I was walking down a little grassy slope, real careful and cautious in baby steps, and I slipped and twisted and landed and snapped 6 bones in my leg.
Ooh.
Just freak accident, which put me in a full leg cast. I had a spiral break on my tibia and 3 breaks in the ankle area and 2 undiagnosed breaks in my tibia and femur at the knee. And so full leg cast put me in the chair for a very long time, and then a half cast, partial cast, but literally, and then recast. Like it was this long, year-long journey. And I began writing that book, Raymond, from that perspective of like I tried to find my voice with the academic scholar part of me. And so I kept writing, like I've got to write about what's happening on the planet, and I've got to bring in that scholarly academic, and I couldn't do it. And I just kept writing and for years before I broke my leg. And when I was put in the chair, it was like, okay, here, now, write from your perspective of what's happening. And then literally, I was just shown about the healing on the planet through my own healing, how bones heal and the stages of healings of fractures, and then how tissue heals and the stages of healing when tissue is wounded. And so it like the body was teaching me how we need to heal on the planet and how we can heal as humanity. So I went through my own healing journey in that book, Fractured Grace, and I shared a lot of childhood experiences, my own mystical experiences, some significant stories that I think help to tell that story. And then the academic would come in a little bit and want to just kind of guide it from that. So I'd add little excerpts of understanding on consciousness and evolution and the planet from that left-brained place. But the voice, my authentic voice, just kind of landed then. It's evolved since then. I'll tell you how it's evolved, but that voice came in to just share from my perspective of being in the chair and the journey, and it wrote itself. It just wrote itself. And yeah.
When did
And so
that book come out?
it was published in 2019.
Okay.
And since then, I've been in this evolving constantly place as well since those years. And I've been doing a lot of letting go and allowing brand new to come in, and the transformation of consciousness and form and body and what have you. And in late 2024, I began, out of a need of a frustration I was having, I began writing letters from an awakening humanity to itself.
Oh.
I was sensing so many who were still in separation, who believed they were in unitive consciousness, but they were creating more separation and more chaos and more emergency and more, just fear. And they were in that space believing they weren't. And so I began to write letters from an awakening humanity to itself, and a new voice came in. It was like the third thing that always helps to balance the two. It, like the divinity came in to speak. Some would call it more channeling, or something like you are doing, but this voice was this embodied divinity that was the voice of wholeness. And so I started writing from that place, ended up writing 365 letters from that voice.
Wow.
And then moved on to 2 more books and wrote 2 different books in 2025 from that voice. And it's kind of stabilized itself. It's a brand new new way of being. It's a brand new voice that feels really stabilized and good. I'm really, really thankful for that experience.
Yeah. For me, one of the greatest gifts that happened was last year in 2024. And I had this huge elevation of energy and frequency and uh, began to speak with God. And I started that through automatic writing and journaling. And and I've continued that journaling, although I don't journal every day, and it's kind of spread out. But I've found that every time I sit down and say, God, I want to talk about this. I don't understand something. I get answers, and it's like constantly being recentered and refocused. So it's a very healing process. And God has said, tell people that anyone can speak with God. It's a matter of learning how. And I also learned that it is a matter of raising our, um, what's the word I'm looking for? It's our raising our subtle energy level because now our world is so full of cell phone, and radio frequency energy of many different types that that has caused interference for a lot of people. But there are some simple ways to raise energy sufficiently to connect with the divine. It can be with God or with angels, or I know it seems like a lot of people aren't comfortable talking with God. But, it's probably conditioned by some of the Christian teachings, et cetera. It says you can't talk with God, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so that has been incredible. And God has repeatedly said to me, even though you may have some fear, I may have some fear about talking about conversations with God, that anyone is able to do it if they learn how, if they take certain steps. And um, so I keep coming back to that, and part of me is thinking about what I'm going to do after this book gets published, um, and that I might create a course about that. I don't know, but um, there, I'm sure the same kind of thing is happening for other people as well, who are a step ahead in the awakening process.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So, do you hear stories from other people about that kind of thing?
Yeah, I work with a lot of different people who are in this process. And the leading edge of where I see humanity right now is in the stabilization of that, is really the embodiment of our divinity, and having that be a full-time substantiation, stabilization. And so, we've had decades and decades of practice here on the planet of, going through meditation and
Yeah.
trances and other like spiritual experiences, mountaintop experiences. We've had states of consciousness. And so there are those who are just waking up. There's still people on the planet who have never had one of those states. They've never had one of those whoa oneness experience or an awakening. And then an awakening, because I believe, like you, that we're layering or unpeeling perhaps. And so we're moving from states to the stage to the age. This is how I like to teach it. So we're moving from states of consciousness, higher frequency, that unitive space, into the stage of that, which is really about substantiating it in the body, coming all the way in, and looking at how that really influences language, behavior, choice. It's like the full embodiment changes everything, because there's no more separation consciousness. When you're in the embodiment of it, you're bringing in unity, and you're in a new stage of human development.
Right.
And so we got the individuals doing this as well as the collective. So then the next movement, Raymond, is from the stage of it into the age. And that's why you're hearing some of us, Bob Atkinson, Jude Curvan, we're talking about the unitive age. Just we're moving from this age of separation. We could talk about it being the industrial age. We can name a lot of things about it, mechanistic, separation, the age of separation. But we're moving into the unitive age, the golden age, this new era, this new epoch. And so moving from state to stage to really substantiating the age means we're moving from the individual coming into that stage into the collective awakening and moving humanity as a whole into that age. So it's exciting. And yes, more and more people are really embodying this divinity, understanding it in a new way. Like you're talking about frequencies, building fields, like understanding coherence, resonance, emergence. It's like we're being so divinely supported to do this work on the planet. It isn't funny. Like we are here fully supported, and the pathways right there, the blueprints are right in front of us, and we just need to learn how to substantiate and move into the collective together.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I want to kind of shift, and that probably is a perfect transition to my next question. And I noticed that you say on your website, and I think I've seen it elsewhere, that you are a mentor to others to help uh, what individuals and particularly leaders, perhaps of organizations, make the shift or step into this next stage or next age.
Yeah.
Tell me about that and what you've been experiencing in doing that.
Thank you. Thanks, Raymond. So as a psychotherapist, I began doing spiritual direction. I came out of nowhere. I had a pastor ask me way back when, boy, I should figure out how long it's been. And he said, will you be my spiritual director? And I'm like, oh, no, I'm not a spiritual director. No. And he's like, yeah, you're a mystic. And I want to sit with the mystic and learn from you. And it began a new trajectory for me from the psychotherapy into the more spiritual work individually, like you and I are talking about. It's like, oh, those states of being, how do we stabilize that? How do we come into that next stage of our human development as an individual? So before I began doing the collective work, I started to work with those individuals. And what happened was it evolved very quickly into very high functioning individuals who are in leadership positions, high impact. And I've worked as a consultant in organizations. I've worked in different ways of doing it, but what the sweet spot is working with those leaders to bring this consciousness and awareness in and teaching the new skills of how to shift their leadership from the old model, because we're moving out of patriarchal models of top-down dominance, and nobody's teaching anybody how to do it differently. We hear things like, oh, is it a circle? Is it holacracy? Is it like, what are the models of leadership now? And when we work with the individual and they begin to substantiate the consciousness, they get frequency, they start to understand coherence. They know how to bring coherence into their organizations. They can do it subtly without coming in and say, we're all going to have a spiritual awakening and change the organization. They can begin to change the organization from how they step into the room and the presence that they bring and the coherence that they bring. And when they start doing that, they start to give usually the employees and their leadership team permission to experiment, permission to play, permission to be in the joy, permission to start talking about the bottom line very differently.
Mhm.
because we're conditioned in the old way of
Mhm.
separation, which is also about scarcity, is like, wow, bottom line. We've got to pay attention to the bottom line. And so we've started to talk about people, planet, purpose. We've started to raise awareness in business. We started to talk about regenerative models. We're talking about the planet, taking care of the planet. So all of a sudden, all of these different sectors are raising awareness, raising consciousness,
That's good.
and these high impact leaders can come in and use that in a way where they're building larger fields. And I'll give you an example of someone that I'm working with that has been a very effective leader in leading the field in making significant change in the healthcare arena.
Oh,
And so she's been that way, and she's working in models where insurance companies and hospital systems and other systems are still working in the old way, patriarchal, old models of leadership. And so what she's begun to do is to say, now when I'm going in to negotiate to make radical change, and I want to gentle the birth, not tear down the healthcare industry. I want to help them transform from the inside out. So she's begun to have really important negotiation meetings with insurance personnel, insurance companies, and healthcare systems from the inside out by going in and creating the field and inviting them to come into resonance with her, to start their meeting in a way where, do you mind if we just take a breath and start in silence? And so she's gently bringing it in, but learning how to hold a field where those at the negotiation table can feel her presence being different. So they can hear the message without feeling threatened. They can hear that message in a way that it's coming wrapped in so much love and light and safety that they're going, oh, there's another way. Well, let's think about it. Let's problem solve a little bit. Well, let's try out some new ideas. How do we get there in increments or without like radically burning down the barn? What can we do? So just her coming in with this embodied presence and coherence and resonance, building this beautiful field, the frequency that you're talking about. Others in that can entrain. In physics, we know that
right,
that where the highest frequency is, we entrain to that higher frequency,
right.
or we leave because we can't hold that. And that's where our high impact leaders are going now. It's like they're getting it.
With that example, does she, and this is putting labels on something, but does she say creating a field of, and I'm inclined to say creating a field of unity and love. Those might not be the words that she finds that work in healthcare. I don't know, but
Yeah, she's not using those words at all. She's not saying let's create a field. She's creating the field and walking into the negotiation room,
uh,
and people feel her authenticity. They feel her heart. They see her light. They see hope that, oh, we can change some things and we'll still be okay. They could see all of her knowledge. She's incredible, highly trained, very intelligent, has solutions. So they can see that she's someone that's reputable, that they can trust, but they feel safe in her presence. And it opens the conversation and the dialogue into something way more constructive than, I'm coming in to change you. You're going to hold to your format. You're going to hold to your format. There's no negotiating because we're all holding everything tight to the vest, right? We're holding our cards. We're not going to, and she's coming in going, I'm just a vessel here. And there's some options. There's some ways that you can transform, and let's see if it matches. And very non-threatening, very, very kind and gentle, and in a way that most people in a boardroom are not used to hearing.
mhm.
Yeah.
that's that's so incredible. That was such a powerful story. And so I'm Thank you for sharing that. That's exactly the kind of unitive narrative that uh, we need to hear, that the world needs to hear. And, I think um, well, many of us, like I'm thinking of myself, I'm definitely been going through a learning process. How do I do this? How do I talk about this? How do I share my experience without being rejected or kicked out or whatever?
Yeah.
So um,
Or being the crazy woo woo one, you know?
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you how often do you hear that word? You woo woo. That's too woo woo.
Yeah, it used to be all the time. I would, it would be like, ooh, that's on the fringes. I'm not sure. I think that one of my gifts and superpowers, Raymond, is that I came into it so early that I didn't want to be seen as woo woo or flaky or anything like that. So I developed this for a very long time. And I developed it before, like, even for example, when did I start my podcast? 2012 or 2013? I think it was 2013. I started the Dr. Julie Show, All Things Connected. And back then, we still weren't here like where we're at now today. And so in 2013, it was like we were proving that all things were connected. The science wasn't quite there and what have you. So I developed that ability to be in my academic, scholarly left brain side and bring in the mystic in a way that I could speak in metaphor, in story, in just different kinds of examples that help people go, oh,
Mhm.
so I never went woo woo. And you notice there's a lot of people in a lot of different expressions on the planet that are woo woo, whether you're channeling or you're galactic or you're bringing in the angels or you're bringing like there's a lot of different ways
Yeah.
that this expresses itself. And I think from just a young directive of me, I was taught that that's not going to be how I come in. I'm not going to be too woo woo, even though some close to me that didn't get it would call me woo woo. I was never an extreme woo woo person ever. It was like, oh yeah, pretty grounded, Midwestern girl, got my feet on the ground. I can stand up in front of a crowd and talk about these concepts and they don't know that I'm being woo woo because I learned how to talk about it from science and spiritual wisdom traditions and the mystic part of me. I can't talk about the mystical, but I can certainly talk about ancient spiritual wisdom traditions and the science. And then the ineffable gets brought in, and I can hold all three. So, but learning, and I would say that to all your leaders and people tuning in that are listening, is bringing the science in, because now we have the
Yes.
unitive science. We're evolving. We have the science and all those mystical ancient wisdom traditions are right here too, and they're saying the same thing. So
Yeah.
even like the Dr. Julie Show, All Things Connected, it's like now we don't even have to argue it. We're not convincing anybody, but everybody goes, oh yeah, all things are connected. I know that. It's redundant. So
What I've observed happening is that as we become more and more integrated and you know connected to the truth and um, more in the flow of that, life becomes better. Life becomes more. We become more fully alive. It's
yeah,
we see the potential of life itself, and so and that's a fun kind of shift to
yeah.
have happen because the world starts looking like a much friendlier, healthier place when you do that.
Yeah. There's something really important about that with consciousness, as we're talking about changing our consciousness can change the world, is that literally there are so many operating at, let's say, a computer operating system of 1.0, and now we're learning how to use the 2.0. So there are people who are here in 2.0, very, very versed in that and very efficient at the system of 2.0. So if you're having a glitch and you're trying to learn, there are those that are there. There's still a lot that are primarily in 1.0. And then there's those in between trying to use the new operating system, but don't quite have it. And when you get there, so some people call it 3D, 5D, there's just lots
Right.
of ways that we're referencing this on the planet when it comes to frequency and the multidimensional realms of how we are multidimensional beings. But the piece that's fun is when I talked about state to stage to age, we're also able to literally move out of those states of consciousness that were flow states. So when you think of a creative that gets into a flow state, or an athlete that gets into a flow state, people have been teaching how to get into that flow state for a long time. We're
Right.
moving out of the flow state and into an evolutionary flow state. So I'm calling it the evolutionary flow state, which is more substantiated and stable. So it's like you're in the cosmic flow with the universe and you are a co-creator of bringing in this, designing intelligence of the universe and flowing with it and co-creating and co-evolving in a way that is so much fun. Things move faster, the miracles happen everywhere. It's a whole different way in
Yes.
that 2.0 world of our version of our world versus where we used to be in a mechanistic worldview. You had to build a house with, like if you think of where we were in science and separation and what have you, it took so much to get from where we're at to where we're going. And up here, we're there, so
Right.
it's fun. It's a whole different kind of flow state.
It is. Yes. Julie, this has been incredible to have you on the show and share so much about what you've learned in your own life and your own experience. Um, and again, that's what I want this book to be about, to share these kind of messages. It's interesting that when I sat down, I wrote the first chapter that I wanted in the book, kind of a introduction, somewhat in depth to consciousness for someone who's not there and might be reading it for the first time. And I wrote one thing, and it was good in one way, but I realized that nope, that's not going to do it. Threw that away. Wrote a totally different chapter, and I'm still, I was still trying to bridge between 1.0 and 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that I've gotten it perfect, but it's better than it was. And, but that's the whole thing about this book, is to help that, to help provide a bridge.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you
And
for doing that. We
so,
need more bridges.
any final words that you'd like to share?
Well, I think that what you just shared is a fun example of what I'm noticing more and more with others, that when your head thinks it knows what it's supposed to do
Right.
and you create from that space, oftentimes it's in the old paradigm. It's in the old world. It's in 1.0 of how we used to do things, how we would achieve, how we would accomplish things, how we would move from A to B. And so often we're being challenged now because it just doesn't work anymore. So, like when you had to throw that chapter away, I did that just 1 month ago today. I was preparing for a speech and I did the same thing, Raymond. In June or July, I wrote version 1 of what I thought I needed to do to deliver this. I had 75 minutes with a group. And so I created version number 1 and then heard, nope, that's not it. Throw it away. And I'm like, oh, okay. And realize, oh, am I in my head thinking what I want them to learn, what I want them, what I want to teach? Or am I being the way shower, like you said? Am I, what to do? So I created version 2, like tried to get my mind out of the way and let this awakening humanity speak to itself. And I kind of had an outline. And a week or so before, I heard, nope, throw it away. And what
Huh.
I heard was show up, listen. I was speaking on Sunday. The event started on Thursday. So I had Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I was speaking on Sunday and I just heard show up, be fully present, listen, and then you're going to deliver what you need. So without preparation, I showed up. I was in that moment and it was clearly a 2.0, maybe even a 3.0 version of what needed to be delivered that day. And so, yeah, I love your example. We've got to trust the process and we need to trust this designing intelligence. This divine intelligence is right here, embodied in every cell. It's coded inside of us. So when we trust this designing intelligence of the universe, the cosmos, to come in and be the primary expression that's moving through us, all will be well and everything will work itself out.
Well, that's fantastic news. I know that a lot of listeners will say that as well. So, again, thank you for sharing that. Please share your website or how people can learn more about you.
Great. There's a couple different things I would share. Number one, juliekrull.com is where you'll find me. You can sign up for my newsletter. I do a weekly little newsletter, and on other socials. On there, there's a tab called Imaginal Souls, or they could go to imaginalsouls.net. That is our community. We're gathering with like-minded people to co-mentor one another, to bring this awareness, this consciousness into our work and our lives. And so we're a growing community that they can come into the connection field as well on imaginalsouls.net or on the tab on the juliekrull.com where it says Imaginal Souls. It gives you an option to come into the connection field or to come into Imaginal Souls. And Imaginal Souls is a smaller group of people who are really serious about doing this work on the planet. And we're coming together to do it. It's time. It's time. So
Thank you again. And to all of my listeners, have a great day and a great life.